Cool. I'm really excited to host this panel, which I'm calling A to Z of the storage stack in the decentralized world. And we heard an introduction to Filecoin from Matt. We heard a lot about FVM from Sarah. So I thought it would be fun to bring on board a few other folks who are, we mentioned most of all of your projects already a couple of times. But yeah, it would be really nice to get a quick intro from each of you on what are you working on and what's your project about to start with. Maybe Patrick, you want to start?
Yeah, I can kick us off. My name is Patrick Woodhead. I am the Retrieval Markets lead at Protocol Labs. The Retrieval Markets team was set up as really a program to really improve the retrieval side of the Filecoin network and also to some regard IPFS. I think the initial aim was to try and get sub 1 second retrievals for all data stored on Filecoin at some percentile value, and we've made great progress on that. My team has now working particularly on two products, the Saturn network and the Station network, and we're really here supposed to talk about Saturn, so I'll just focus on that one. Saturn is an IPFS powered globally distributed storage and retrieval network. So Saturn started out as essentially a CDN for Filecoin. So how can we first fetch data out of the Filecoin network and then accelerate it to clients around the world? For those who don't know the term CDN, it's a content delivery network. Saturn launched back in October last year during Lab Week 2022. And I think at the time it had, we launched the first few nodes. We're now up to over sort of 3,000 points of presence or nodes in the Saturn network, accelerating content for the Filecoin network. And yeah, we're really excited to allow people to build on top of Saturn. But yeah, I'll go into that in more depth in a bit.
Cool. Who wants to go next? Mikhail, do you want to talk next?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Mikhail. I'm product manager for IPC, which stands for Interplanetary Consensus. So IPC is a blockchain scaling framework that allows developer to create their own side chains to offload workloads from the mainnet. The big idea behind IPC is to allow Web2 planetary scale apps in decentralized Web3 world. So speaking about IPC, there are many reasons why you want to move your smart contracts into a side chain. Most important are performance, price, and maybe some custom requirements that you have. On the performance side, subchains can increase performance in two ways. So you can increase it by running more efficient consensus protocol. For example, we have a demo of our consensus protocol called Tranter that show performance up to 30,000 transactions per second with 2-second finality time, which is much better than many of the networks today. Also, you can spin off side chains that are less crowded and have less concurrent transaction and increase performance in this way. On the pricing side, sidechains can have a different pricing model. Since you create your own chain, you can define the rules, so gas prices can be orders of magnitude lower. And the last but not least is the custom requirements. For example, you want to have a chain that have a different characteristics than mainnet. One example is regional chain. Let's say you want to build a side chains that have sub 1 second finality times. It's not going to be possible in a global distributed chain because of the speed of light running around the globe. So if you place all your nodes in concrete geography, and our framework allows it because you control your hardware, so you can spin off side chain with a certain performance characteristics. So if you're building a scalable service that process a lot of transaction and function calls, you can maybe benefit from IPC.
Cool. So before I move on to David and Ashwanth, one of the things we want you all to understand from this panel is that there's all sorts of storagey things for all types of hackers that come to our hackathons. So some of you want to really get into the weeds of how are those data packets going from one peer to another, and then and then like really keep digging deeper. There's some of you who want to just, build your own, solve a problem, build your dApp and just store data on a decentralized system. There's some who want to really understand the Filecoin network and the Filecoin economy and build something really specific for a host of clients and storage providers that are present here. So no matter which category you fall into, there's something you can play with, and most of those projects have bounties at this hackathon. So with that background, I'll pass on to David.
Hey, thanks, Nikki. So I'm David. I lead the DAG House team. We're currently within Protocol Labs, and we develop a product called Web3 Storage, as well as NFT storage. Basically the same product from like an under the hood perspective. NFT storage is specifically for off-chain NFT data, and then Web3 storage is for all data in general. The products themselves are hosted IPFS solutions. So you can upload data using a simple client library or API or even a drag and drop interface. And that data is hosted to the public IPFS network. So if you want to upload a bunch of data that way, rather than running your own IPFS infrastructure, it's a good option. What happens is the client library generates the content address of your data, that hash of the data that references, it's kind of like the unique fingerprint of your data locally. So it's trustless. And then you can grab it off of the IPFS network using your own node, any gateway. Our gateway is optimized for speed for content uploaded to Web3 storage. And then the other cool part is it gets your data into Filecoin deals. So we store your data in multiple places. The cool thing about IPFS is the same reference can grab your data from a number of different places as long as it's connected to the public IPFS network, and Filecoin deals is one place there. So spinning up your own deals to store data in Filecoin can often be a little bit difficult across data preparation, miner selection, things like that. So we take care of all that underneath the hood for you.
Cool. Over to you, Ashwanth.
Hey everyone, it's great to meet you. Thanks so much for joining this event and the panel. It's great to see all the participation and energy around building on Filecoin and FVM. So I sit at the intersection of storage and DeFi capabilities on Filecoin. So as you probably know, the Filecoin virtual machine launched earlier this March, which introduced user programmability and smart contracts to the Filecoin blockchain. So very exciting stuff. In the past couple of months, we've seen explosive growth of DeFi on Filecoin, because essentially, in order to do all of these things that Mikhail, David, and Patrick are mentioning, to store data on the Filecoin network, you need to be able to pledge Filecoin, the token, as pledge collateral. So before the FVM launched, there were kind of slow and clunky ways of getting this Filecoin, the token, to be pledged to the network. And once the FVM launched, DeFi came about and made this a lot easier to connect storage providers and token holders and kind of bridge that gap. And so DeFi is just one example of the use cases of FVM. There are so many other applications that are being built on top of FVM today. And so that's definitely a pathway that, we're looking for builders to explore and learn more and try and kind of do all of these sorts of things, because there's so much flexibility that can be incorporated and creativity that can be really utilized. The one thing that I will share is one link, which is the overall growth of DeFi on the Filecoin network in the past couple of months. This is the kind of growth that we're looking to replicate with other things built on top of the FVM as well. And so happy to go into more detail specifically on DeFi later, or any other applications built on top of FVM.
Cool. So I think that covers the entire breadth of different things you can do within the Filecoin ecosystem using different tools. So maybe we move on to the next question, which is around what are of all the hackathons that we have done, I've seen hackers combine different tools from within the Filecoin ecosystem, and also with like lots of things from outside the Filecoin ecosystem, be it different different L1s, L2s, different dev tools in very creative ways. So so this is a question for you all. Like, do you have any ideas, suggestions on how could your particular tool be combined with something else? Like, any ideas to inspire hackers? Maybe Mikhail, you want to go first?
Okay. Yeah, I think IPC can be a base layer for a bunch of very interesting storage related use cases on Filecoin. And I think the first bucket for me is making it easier for developers to use Filecoin network, but providing a more kind of consistent set of primitives that are easier to use. For example, one of the things we were discussing is like storage on ramping. So like make it easier to place small files on IPFS immediately with eventual backup to Filecoin deal. So this use case can be built on top of IPC. And what IPC provides is like a higher speed. You can put essentially more transaction per second. You don't have to think about what you're putting on chain. You can process everything on chain without thinking about performance and price. Storage aggregation in another use case that closely related. Like if you want to store smaller files, smaller data batches on Filecoin, you want to aggregate them in a single 32 gigabyte block. So this logic also can be moved into IPC sidechain. Another related use case is perpetual storage. So perpetual storage will create a financial model to store files indefinitely in like in RV sense. So you can store your NFTs and other high value information like without thinking when it's going to be garbage collected. There's other use cases that I think is also interesting. For example, off-chain compute networks. Like why do we have to stop at the data? We want to also to process the data. So like if you want to off-chain compute nodes that can process a lot of data stored on Filecoin, you need to coordinate them somehow. You need to have a common ledger to post like jobs, complete the jobs, validate the jobs are completed. I think IPC can be a great platform for that. We're also looking pretty intently into space of distributed databases. Like, can you put SQLite or some like SQL database right on chain without using centralized infrastructure? And like traditionally, it was very hard to do it on blockchain. I think IPC with increased speed, speed and throughput can make this use case also accessible in distributed scenario. So yeah, if you have a use case that needs a lot of scalability with a cheap, fast, and customizable sidechains, you should look to IPC.
Gotcha. Yeah, IPC is definitely really exciting, especially like what's the next big thing after FVM. So I think IPC gives that scaling, and there's a lot of things that are moving very fast. So if you're building something and you get stuck somewhere, feel free to reach out to the team. We'll be available to support you on any of these ideas that you're trying to build. Okay, maybe David, how do you use Web3 storage with other tools? Same question.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that Web3 storage is useful in general if you're doing any on-chain application and you need to store off-chain data. So like in the last few years, NFT is kind of the biggest area where this is the case. And I know minting NFTs on FVM hasn't really been a huge thing yet, but that'd be a really interesting thing to explore because of a lot of the optimizations that are on FVM. So you can put your off-chain data references from your on-chain transaction, make those an IPFS reference and store that data on NFT storage or Web3 storage. Also for any use case that requires that on-chain proof on Filecoin to exist for that that data is actually being stored by a storage provider. You can use Web3 storage to pretty easily get your data into a storage deal. So there are cool applications for the FVM, things like perpetual storage, data DAOs, where if there's a set of data that you and a bunch of other people care about, you can create an incentive structure or endowment structure, something like that, to make sure that that data is preserved. So getting that initial transaction or that initial proof that that data is in the Filecoin network can happen through Web3 storage. Outside of that, yeah, I think, like Patrick's here with Saturn, and I think, Web3 storage does a good job of onboarding data, but Saturn's more on the read side of the house. And I'm not sure how programmable the Saturn stuff is, but I think there's a lot of cool use cases to explore too around accelerating content you care about that's available on the IPFS network, but utilizing other infrastructure to make sure that that content is quickly accessible and things like that.
Cool. Sounds great. I think this is a good segue into maybe Patrick's ideas around how do you use Saturn CDNs with like other tooling.
Yeah, sure. So I suppose that the simplest thing people can do is if they just need to retrieve data from IPFS or Filecoin, then there's just a very simple integration they can do and just fetch stuff from Saturn. And if that, I think that could form a very small part of a wider project if someone just wants to use it to retrieve data. But I think from our perspective, the ideas where people are going under the hood a bit more, looking at some integrations that are a bit more interesting for a hackathon. So I suppose, as David alluded to, like having a play around to see if you can start loading data up through NFT storage, Web3 storage, and then retrieving it through Saturn, and just trying to figure out what's going on under the hood is an interesting thing to explore. Similarly with IPC subnets, seeing if you could come up with a little proof of concept which is running Saturn nodes somehow on an IPC subnet would be an interesting thing to explore. And Mikhail and I have talked about that in the past, and how that could work. To give a few more examples, because Saturn's it's a trustless network, you can't trust, the client can't trust the data that it's retrieving from one of the Saturn points of presence. So the Saturn core engineering team has built a service worker which goes in the browser and incrementally verifies the data as it's coming back in. So people could hack around with that, see if they could add extra features to this service worker, which might help or optimize for video streaming or other such use cases. Or people could have a go at making a client service worker style thing, but not for a browser. There might be many other clients apart from browsers, like gaming consoles or engines, that sort of thing, which would like to retrieve data and make sure that it's valid before putting it into their displays. So yeah, having a go at creating other such clients would be really interesting, particularly in the gaming space where we think content addressing is quite a good fit. On the subject of gaming, trying to build or migrate an HTML5 game to be served by Saturn could be an interesting idea. Yeah, let's just have a quick look. What else have I got here? Yeah, integrating a live peer media node with a Saturn L1, just trying to get other such interesting nodes which are doing functionality on video or gaming, and trying to see how that would fit with a Saturn L1, and or even Station. So Station's the other product in my team. Seeing if you could use Station to do sort of edge workers functionality alongside a Saturn L1 node would be an interesting thing to explore. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of ideas for people to start thinking about. Okay, moving to Ashwanth. So I'll change the question a little bit for you. What are some interesting DeFi applications that you have seen that combine either tools within the Filecoin ecosystem or knowledge about the Filecoin network and have become really cool?
Definitely. So I think a lot of the DeFi models that we've seen today are relatively simple implementations of DeFi models that exist on other chains. So for example, the Filecoin virtual machine is an EVM compatible machine. So some of the first iterations of DeFi protocols on Filecoin were just lifted and leveraged from EVM smart contracts. So very kind of simple start. And now we've started to see more protocols come along that are more advanced and more evolved. We have, I think, roughly 13 to 15 different DeFi protocols today that are contributing to all the great progress, and they all kind of vary in complexity. So that's the first thing. I And the second thing is some of the DeFi protocols have actually been built by existing storage providers. So storage providers that have pretty deep and nuanced knowledge of the Filecoin ecosystem from being active participants on the network have either been advisors or have helped build unique and customized solutions that they know are going to work for other storage providers. So that's something to think about as you all are building all of your solutions, is really including and incorporating the kind of existing participants in the Filecoin ecosystem in your builds and designs, because their experience is invaluable. And you should be able to combine that with, again, hopefully the simplicity of building on the FVM.
Gotcha. Cool. I think that covers interesting tooling combinations that people can do at this hackathon. Maybe let's move on to your roadmap. So all of the tools will have their own workshops. You all have seen the schedule, or you'll have access to the schedule on the website. But maybe very quickly, like what's on your roadmap, or what are you excited about hackers to build right now? Maybe David, you could start.
Yeah, so we have a new upload API and client that is currently in beta, and the whole product is going to move over to it. So there are optimizations with it to make it a lot easier to upload, especially large data. So that alone is a good reason to use that. I'll drop the link in the chat to take a look at the beta. But the really cool thing is that it moves from using traditional, bearer tokens, Web2 style auth to something called UCAN. I'll also drop a link to take a look at what UCANs are. But one easy way to think about it is it's like having so you basically have a local key pair. It's like having a wallet locally that you sign transactions with us, where we just verify the signature to know that you actually want to upload that file. And then on top of that, the cool thing is you can delegate permissions to other actors out there who also have key pairs. So if you, let's say, are an NFT marketplace, you want to upload data to your Web3 storage account, but you don't want to run an intermediate server with its own auth for your users to upload to, then you authorize the transaction to go to Web3 storage. You can delegate a UCAN token, sign it with your key pair to your user directly, and they can take that and upload directly to Web3 storage. So I think there's a lot of cool things out there which are more Web3 native, as simple as just kind of generally more serverless and trustless transactions. But you could see a world where the key pair you're using to sign your UCAN token maps to a Filecoin wallet, for instance. So you can have a world where you're delegating permissions to your end users who have Filecoin wallets, or even those users bring their own Web3 storage accounts themselves. So yeah, a lot of cool Web3 native things to explore there. And yeah, I'll just drop the links in the chat now.
Cool. Thanks. Patrick, what about you?
On the Saturn roadmap, coming up next, what we've been working on for a while now is serving the IPFS.io gateway traffic through Saturn rather than it being through a trusted gateway. And that includes the dweb.link traffic as well, actually. So yeah, that's been a big focus of this year. We're also looking at billing and metering, and that sort of links to some of the stuff David was saying about UCANs. We're exploring how we could do so with UCANs to make it work in this decentralized context. That might not be the first version, but that is definitely the long-term vision. Then we're going to be looking into data onboarding and the concept of sort of like hot content, but just how can people get data onto the Saturn network and make it retrievable very quickly. And again, that does involve quite a few conversations with David's team. So it's an interesting intersection between the two teams. And then just more generally, just improving the reliability and performance of retrievals from the IPFS network, as well as from the Filecoin storage provider network. And that links to sort of the retrieval incentives program that's just kicking off, about how we can fetch stuff more quickly and more reliably.
Cool. Mikhail, what about IPC?
Yeah, so we're currently in alpha version of IPC. It's launched back in July, and you are able to use IPC today. So you can deploy your own sidechain, and there is a ability to deploy sidechain on calibration and on Filecoin mainnet, while we don't recommend on alpha to put real money at stake. We're coming with beta that is built with much better stack. It will be much more robust and high performance. It's coming out sometime in Q3, probably closer to the end, and we will be demoing in Phil Dev Summit in Singapore and Iceland, these new features. So like we're looking forward. I think that will be a really cool release. And we're going to launch general availability in Q4, maybe early Q1, but we're really shooting for Q4. And this will be the moment that will be completely like validated and audited, and you can use it for production level applications. So after the launch, we're looking to extend our product. For example, some of the things we're thinking about, like custom subnet types, you can change what's inside your stack, and you can create, for example, compute-intensive sidechains or data-intensive sidechains when you really can bend the solution to your particular requirements. And another cool idea we're thinking about is kind of extending the perimeter of your blockchain to the clients. So currently, if you use a blockchain as a client, you go through some form of gateway. And I think like in the future, that's not going to be necessary. So we're thinking about like how your client can be part of the side chains that roll ups to your kind of like a chain of a higher order. So that's a long-term science fictioning stuff. So yeah, like if you're interested to try what we already launched and what we are launching very soon, please check our links. We'll be sharing them later. Thank you.
Cool, awesome. And Ashwanth, last question for you. So there's a lot of really good DeFi apps already on FVM, right? Like around like the obvious use cases around staking, liquidity pools, etc. Right? So what's next in DeFi, or what's next in the FVM app space that you might want to inspire builders with?
Sure, I'll start by answering that a bit broader and then narrowing in on DeFi. I think specifically, I just dropped in the link to the FVM roadmap in the official Filecoin docs. And so the next couple of months and the rest of the year really focus on making FVM just lighter and easier to use and kind of enhancing its complexity. So that's kind of it from a broader standpoint. And what I would recommend is, this idea of developing applications using smart contracts and optimizing for user programmability has been done before. And so what I would advise to all of you builders out there is to kind of look at what has been successful in other areas and look to replicate and improve on within the Filecoin chain and within the Filecoin ecosystem, because there are opportunities to really expand and develop on those previous capabilities from other spaces, bring it into the Filecoin ecosystem, and then tweak it slightly to be more fit or more tuned for storage market opportunities. So I think being able to look at the success of other chains, knowing which ones would be the most relevant to pick up and put down and then improve on those would be a really good opportunity. And so, like I said, reference throughout this, we could do that with DeFi, where it started pretty simple and people started to build more complex protocols, and then finally started to integrate those more complex protocols with nuance from the Filecoin chain. I think we can definitely start to see that evolution in many other spaces as well.
Cool. Yeah, I think we've given a lot of ideas to hackers in this panel. We are also at time, so thanks a lot everyone for joining and sharing all about the projects you all are working on. Before you leave, please drop where can builders find you beyond the hackathon in the chat, so that for the more curious ones or who want to linger around even after the hackathon, they know where to find you. Thanks everyone.